I was standing in my vineyard at dawn, watching the morning fog roll across the rows of Cabernet Sauvignon vines, when I noticed the bright orange sign staked at the edge of my property that read, "Foreclosure Auction Scheduled." My name is Isaac Everhart, and I had spent the last 7 years turning this 40-acre plot in Sonoma County, California, into something special. The soil here was perfect, the climate ideal, and every vine had been personally selected and nurtured. This wasn't just my business. It was my life's work, my retirement plan, and my sanctuary all rolled into one piece of heaven on earth. I walked closer to the sign, my boots crunching on the gravel path. The notice was dated 3 days prior and scheduled an auction for my entire property in 2 weeks. According to the paperwork stapled to the backing, I owed the Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association exactly $47,000 in back dues, late fees, and penalties. The problem was simple. I had never signed anything agreeing to be part of their HOA. My property predated their development by decades. When I purchased this land in 2018, it was surrounded by old ranches and farmland. The vineyard itself had been here since the 1960s, though it had fallen into disrepair before I bought it. I had poured my savings, my energy, and my soul into restoring it. Then, about 3 years ago, a developer bought the surrounding land and built Meadowbrook Hills, a planned community of cookie-cutter houses with strict rules about lawn ornaments and paint colors. I pulled out my phone and dialed my lawyer, Marcus Chen, who I kept on retainer for the various legal complexities of running a small winery. "Marcus, I need you at the vineyard today. The HOA is trying to auction my property." "What? Hold on, Isaac. Which HOA?" "Meadowbrook Hills. They claim I owe them nearly $50,000. There was a pause on the line. "You never signed their CCRs, did you?" "Not a chance. My property was here first. Then they have no legal standing. I will be there in an hour." "Do not sign anything. Do not speak to anyone from the HOA, and document everything." I spent the next hour photographing the sign from every angle, taking pictures of the property lines, and pulling out my original deed and title documents. The morning sun was burning off the fog when Marcus pulled up in his Tesla, briefcase in hand. Marcus was in his early 40s, sharp as a tack, and had helped me navigate everything from water rights disputes to licensing issues with the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau. He examined the foreclosure notice with a deep frown. "This is absurd," he said. "They are claiming you are in violation of covenants you never agreed to. Did they ever send you anything before this?" "I have gotten letters," I admitted. "Started about 2 years ago. They kept saying I needed to pay dues, maintain my property to their standards, get approval for my equipment sheds. I ignored them because I figured they would realize their mistake." "You still have those letters?" "Every single one. I kept them in case this exact thing happened." We walked back to my house, a restored farmhouse that sat on a small hill overlooking the vineyard. Inside, I pulled out a filing box containing 2 years' worth of correspondence from the Meadowbrook Hills HOA. Marcus spread them across my dining room table, reading through each one methodically. "They have been escalating," he noted. "First friendly reminders, then warnings, then threats, and now this. The president of the HOA is listed as Patricia Cunningham. Never met her. Well, you are about to. I am going to file an emergency motion to stop this auction. But I also think we should go directly to their office and resolve this before it goes further." The Meadowbrook Hills HOA office was located in a small building near the entrance to their development, right next to the community pool and fitness center. The place looked like every other suburban HOA office in America, with bland corporate furniture, motivational posters about community pride, and a receptionist who looked like she would rather be anywhere else. "We are here to see Patricia Cunningham," Marcus announced. The receptionist, whose nameplate read Jennifer, looked us over. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but this is regarding the illegal foreclosure action against the Everhart Vineyard. I suggest you get Mrs. Cunningham immediately, or my next call will be to the county sheriff." Jennifer's eyes widened, and she quickly picked up the phone. Within 2 minutes, we were ushered into an office where Patricia Cunningham sat behind an oversized desk. She was exactly what I expected. Mid-50s, perfectly coiffed blonde hair with highlights, designer glasses hanging from a chain around her neck, and the kind of smile that did not reach her eyes. "Mr. Everhart," she said coolly, "I have been trying to get in touch with you for months. Mrs. Cunningham, I am Marcus Chen, Mr. Everhart's attorney. We are here about the foreclosure notice. My client never signed your HOA agreement and is not bound by your covenants." Patricia's smile tightened. "Mr. Everhart's property falls within the boundaries of Meadowbrook Hills. All properties within our boundaries are subject to our rules and fees." "That is not how property law works," Marcus said flatly. "Did Mr. Everhart sign your CCRs?" "He did not need to. The developer filed amended plat maps that included his property." I felt my blood pressure rising. "You cannot just decide my property is part of your HOA because you want it to be." "Actually," Patricia said, opening a folder, "we can. The developer, Sunset Vista Properties, filed documentation with the county that established the HOA boundaries. Your property is within those boundaries. Therefore, you are subject to our rules." Marcus leaned forward. "Mrs. Cunningham, let me be very clear. You cannot unilaterally impose an HOA on property that was not part of the original development. Mr. Everhart's land predates your community. Any attempt to include his property without his explicit written consent is void. If you proceed with this auction, I will file a lawsuit against the HOA, you personally, and every board member. I will also report this to the California Bureau of Real Estate and the District Attorney's Office for attempted property theft." Patricia's expression hardened. "Our lawyer reviewed everything. It is all legal." "Then your lawyer is either incompetent or lying to you. I am filing an emergency injunction today. The auction will not happen." We left the office with Patricia calling after us about respecting community standards and property values. I was furious, but Marcus put a hand on my shoulder. "Do not worry. This is going to be straightforward in court. They have no case." But things were not straightforward at all. Over the next week, I discovered just how far Patricia and her HOA were willing to go. First, they sent code enforcement to my property, claiming various violations. An inspector showed up and tried to cite me for having agricultural equipment visible from the road. I pointed out that I ran a working vineyard and winery, which was legally permitted and had been operating long before their development existed. The inspector, a tired-looking man in his 60s named Bob, shook his head. "Look, I am just doing what I was told. Between you and me, this is ridiculous, but the HOA filed a complaint and I have to follow up." "Are you going to cite me?" "No. You are operating a legal agricultural business on properly zoned land, but they will probably file another complaint next week about something else." He was right. 3 days later, another inspector came out about unpermitted structures. I showed him the permits for my equipment shed, my fermentation building, and my tasting room. All legal, all properly filed with the county years ago. Meanwhile, Marcus filed the emergency injunction. The hearing was scheduled for 2 days before the auction date. Patricia responded by having the HOA's lawyer file a motion claiming I was a vexatious litigant who had ignored their reasonable attempts at communication for years. The night before the hearing, I sat on my porch with a glass of my own Cabernet, looking out at the vineyard. The vines were heavy with grapes that would be ready for harvest in another month. This should have been a time of anticipation and excitement. Instead, I was fighting to keep everything I had built. My phone rang. It was my neighbor, an old rancher named Bill Peterson, whose property bordered mine on the western edge. "Isaac, I just wanted you to know that HOA sent me a letter today. They are claiming my property is part of their association too." "What?" "Bill, your ranch has been in your family for 3 generations. I know that, and you know that, but they do not seem to care. I think they are trying to expand their territory to collect more dues. This was bigger than just my property." The HOA was making a land grab, trying to force established properties into their association to increase their revenue and control. The hearing the next morning was held in Sonoma County Superior Court. Judge Helen Martinez presided, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with a reputation for cutting through legal nonsense. Marcus and I sat at one table while the HOA's lawyer, a slick-looking man named Gordon Priest, sat at the other with Patricia beside him. Marcus presented our case methodically. He showed the original deed to my property, proving it predated the Meadowbrook Hills development by decades. He presented documentation that I had never signed any HOA agreements. He showed that my property was legally operating as a vineyard and winery with all proper permits and licenses. Gordon argued that the amended plat maps filed by the developer automatically included my property in the HOA boundaries, and that I had received adequate notice of my obligations. Judge Martinez listened to both sides, then asked a simple question. "Mr. Priest, do you have any document bearing Mr. Everhart's signature agreeing to be bound by your HOA's covenants?" "No, Your Honor, but the plat maps supersede the need for individual signatures." "That is not how property law works, Counselor. You cannot impose an HOA on an existing property owner without their consent. The emergency injunction is granted. The auction is canceled. Furthermore, I am ordering the HOA to cease all collection attempts against Mr. Everhart and to remove his property from their claimed boundaries within 30 days. Patricia shot to her feet. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. He is ruining our property values with his industrial farming operation." The judge fixed her with a cold stare. "Mrs. Cunningham, Mr. Everhart's vineyard was there long before your development. If property values are a concern, perhaps you should have chosen a different location. Sit down." I felt a wave of relief, but I could see the fury on Patricia's face. As we left the courtroom, she grabbed my arm. "This is not over," she hissed. "We will find a way to make you comply." Marcus immediately stepped between us. "Mrs. Cunningham, do not contact my client again. Any further communication goes through me." We should have known that would not be the end of it. 2 weeks later, I was doing a routine inspection of my irrigation system when I found that someone had cut several main lines. Water was flooding into the rows, threatening to drown the vines. I spent hours in the mud, making emergency repairs. The damage was estimated at $15,000, not counting the potential loss of grapes. I called the sheriff's office, and a deputy came out to take a report. Deputy Rachel Morrison walked the property with me, documenting the clean cuts in the irrigation lines. "This was deliberate," she said. "These were cut with bolt cutters or something similar. Do you have any idea who might have done this?" "I have a pretty good idea, but I cannot prove it." "The HOA. They have been harassing me for months." She nodded. "We have had other complaints about aggressive HOA tactics in this area. I will file the report, and we will increase patrols around your property." 3 days after that, Someone filed an anonymous complaint with the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau claiming I was operating an illegal distillery. A federal inspector showed up unannounced, requiring me to walk him through my entire operation. Everything was in order, of course, but it cost me a full day of work during the crucial pre-harvest period. Then came the property tax issue. I received a notice from the county assessor's office saying my property tax exemption for agricultural use was being reviewed due to complaints about the nature of operations. This exemption saved me thousands of dollars a year and was critical to the vineyard's profitability. I called Marcus again. They are trying to destroy me piece by piece. I know. I have been getting copied on all these complaints and violations. They are clearly coordinating a harassment campaign. I think it is time to go on the offense. Marcus filed a lawsuit against the Meadowbrook Hills HOA, Patricia Cunningham personally, and 3 board members. We sued for harassment, tortious interference with business operations, defamation, and requested a restraining order. We also asked for damages to cover the irrigation repairs and lost business. The lawsuit got their attention. Within a week, I received a certified letter from Gordon Priest offering to settle. They would drop all claims against my property in exchange for me dropping the lawsuit. No admission of wrongdoing, no damages paid. Absolutely not, I told Marcus. They have cost me tens of thousands of dollars and months of stress. They nearly destroyed my business. I want them held accountable. I agree. Let us push forward. Discovery was enlightening. Through subpoenas and depositions, we learned that Patricia and the HOA board had specifically targeted my property as part of an expansion strategy. They had even discussed in board meeting minutes how they could bring the vineyard into compliance and use my property as an example to other surrounding landowners. More disturbing, we discovered they had contacted several of my wholesale customers, claiming my winery was operating illegally and warning them not to do business with me. I had wondered why 2 of my restaurant accounts had suddenly canceled their orders. Now, I knew. The irrigation sabotage remained unsolved, but during Patricia's deposition, Marcus asked her where she was on the night it happened. She claimed she was at home alone, with no alibi. When pressed about whether she knew anyone who might want to damage my property, she took the Fifth Amendment. Our trial date was set for 6 months out, but things escalated before we ever got to court. I was in town one afternoon, picking up supplies at the farm store when I ran into Patricia in the parking lot. She was with another woman I did not recognize, both carrying shopping bags. "Mr. Everhart," Patricia said loudly enough for other people to hear. "Still squatting on that property illegally, I see." I kept my voice level. "Patricia, you need to stop. The court was clear. I am not part of your HOA. That land should be used for proper housing, not your vanity project. You know how many families could live there instead of your stupid grapes." The other woman chimed in. "He is one of those selfish people who only care about themselves. No community spirit." I started to respond, but Marcus's words echoed in my head about not engaging. I turned and walked away, but Patricia called after me. "We are going to get that land one way or another. You cannot stop progress." That threat proved more literal than I expected. A month before trial, I received a notice that the county was considering a rezoning petition for my property. Someone had applied to have the agricultural zoning changed to residential, which would effectively end my ability to operate the vineyard. The applicant listed on the petition was Sunset Vista Properties, the same developer that built Meadowbrook Hills. I immediately called Marcus, who discovered that Patricia's husband, David Cunningham, was a partner in Sunset Vista Properties. This whole thing was starting to make sense. They wanted my property not just for HOA dues, but as part of an expansion of their development. "This is corruption," I said. "They are using the HOA to harass me into selling." "Possibly, but we need to prove it. I am going to request all communications between the HOA and Sunset Vista properties. If we can show a conspiracy, this gets a lot more serious." The rezoning petition required a public hearing before the County Planning Commission. Marcus advised me to attend and speak against it, and to bring anyone else who supported keeping the agricultural zoning. The hearing was held on a Wednesday evening in the County Administration Building. I arrived early with Marcus, Bill Peterson, and about a dozen other local farmers and ranchers who were concerned about the precedent this would set. If they could force a rezoning on my property, no agricultural land in the area was safe. The hearing room was packed. On one side sat the farmers and agricultural supporters. On the other side sat Patricia, David Cunningham, several HOA board members, and about 30 residents of Meadowbrook Hills, all wearing matching T-shirts that said "Smart Growth for Sonoma." The Planning Commission consisted of 5 members, and they sat at a raised table at the front of the room. The chairman, a retired engineer named Thomas Wright, called the meeting to order. David Cunningham presented first. He was a smooth talker in an expensive suit, with a presentation full of graphics and charts. "The Everhart property represents an underutilized asset in a growing county that desperately needs housing," he began. "Our proposal would create 75 new homes, providing housing for approximately 200 residents. The property is already surrounded by residential development on 3 sides, making this rezoning a logical extension of existing use patterns." He clicked through slides showing architectural renderings of houses, parks, and community spaces. It all looked very appealing if you did not know the real story. The current agricultural use is a holdover from a previous era. While we respect Mr. Everhart's efforts, the reality is that Sonoma County's future is in managed growth, not small-scale farming operations that consume vast amounts of water during drought conditions. That last part stung because it was a blatant misrepresentation. My vineyard used modern drip irrigation and actually consumed less water per acre than the lawns and landscaping in Meadowbrook Hills. When it was my turn to speak, I approached the microphone with my prepared statement, but I decided to speak from the heart instead. My name is Isaac Everhart. I have owned and operated Everhart Vineyard for 7 years. Before that, this land was a vineyard for over 50 years. This is not just about me or my property. This is about whether we want to preserve agricultural land in Sonoma County or let developers turn every piece of open space into tract housing. I paused, looking at each of the planning commissioners in turn. Mr. Cunningham talked about underutilized assets and water use, but he did not mention that his HOA has been illegally harassing me for years, trying to force me out. He did not mention that someone sabotaged my irrigation system, causing thousands of dollars in damage. He did not mention that his wife, who runs that HOA, has been filing false complaints with county agencies trying to shut down my legal business. And he conveniently did not mention that he is married to the HOA president, making this entire rezoning petition a clear conflict of interest. There was murmuring in the audience. David Cunningham's face reddened. "If you approve this rezoning, you are not voting for smart growth. You are rewarding harassment and corruption. You are telling every farmer and rancher in this county that if a developer wants their land badly enough, they can just change the rules." Marcus followed my statement with a legal presentation about the requirements for rezoning, the importance of agricultural preservation, and the suspicious timing of this petition during our ongoing lawsuit. Then several other farmers spoke, each one emphasizing how this decision would impact the entire agricultural community. The Meadowbrook Hills residents countered with emotional speeches about property values, traffic from my delivery trucks, and dust from the vineyard affecting their quality of life. One woman even claimed her children had allergies triggered by the grapevines, which was absurd. Patricia took the microphone last. I have lived in Meadowbrook Hills for 3 years, and in that time, I have worked tirelessly to build a community where families can thrive, she began. Mr. Everhart may have legal ownership of that property, but he has no sense of community responsibility. He refuses to maintain his property to reasonable standards. His industrial operation does not belong in a residential area. The property was their first, someone called out from the audience. Patricia ignored the interruption. The question before this commission is simple. Do we want Sonoma County to move forward into a prosperous future, or do we want to be held back by the past? I urge you to approve this rezoning and let progress happen. The Planning Commission deliberated for nearly an hour before announcing they would table the decision pending further review. It was not a victory, but it was not a loss either. We had bought more time. After the hearing, as people filed out, David Cunningham approached me in the parking lot. "You made some serious accusations in there," he said, his earlier smoothness replaced with barely contained anger. "I could sue you for slander." "Truth is an absolute defense to slander," Marcus interjected. "And we have documentation of everything Isaac said." "This is a legitimate business proposal. The fact that my wife is involved with the HOA is irrelevant." "Then why did not you disclose it to the Planning Commission?" I asked. David stepped closer, his voice low. "You are going to lose that vineyard one way or another. You could have sold it to us 2 years ago for a fair price and walked away. Now you are going to lose it in court, or you are going to lose it through rezoning, or you are going to give up because we are going to make your life hell. But you will lose it." "Is that a threat?" Marcus asked. "It is a prediction." We watched him walk away to where Patricia waited by a Mercedes SUV. They drove off together, and I felt a cold certainty that this was far from over. The trial was now 3 weeks away. Marcus and I spent every available hour preparing. We had a strong case on the original issue of the illegal foreclosure. But now we were also pursuing damages for the harassment campaign and trying to prove conspiracy between the HOA and Sunset Vista properties. Discovery had provided us with some damaging evidence. Email exchanges between Patricia and David discussed removing the vineyard obstacle and securing the property for Phase 2. There were also communications between Patricia and other board members about using code enforcement and county agencies to create problems for me. The smoking gun was a text message from Patricia to a board member named Sharon Davies that read, "Keep the pressure on Everhart. Every complaint, every violation, every delay. He will crack eventually. David needs that land." Marcus was confident about our case, but I was exhausted. The constant stress of fighting the HOA while trying to run a business had taken its toll. I had lost weight, I was not sleeping well, and my harvest was approaching while I was spending all my time in legal meetings instead of in the vineyard. My winemaker, a talented young woman named Brenda Lopez, who I had hired 2 years earlier, was keeping operations running, but she was stretched thin. We needed to hire seasonal workers for the harvest, coordinate with our bottling supplier, manage fermentation schedules, and handle a dozen other tasks. Instead, I was sitting in Marcus's office reviewing depositions. "Isaac, I need you to focus," Marcus said gently during one of our prep sessions. "I know this is overwhelming, but we are almost there. 3 more weeks and we go to trial. The evidence is solid. We are going to win, and we are going to win big. What if we do not? What if the jury sides with them? They would not. No jury is going to support an HOA illegally foreclosing on a property owner who never signed their agreement. And with the harassment evidence, we have them on multiple counts. The only question is how much we are awarded in damages. 2 weeks before trial, something happened that changed everything. I was working late in the vineyard, checking on the ripeness of the grapes, when I saw flashlights moving through the rows. It was after midnight, and no one should have been on my property. I quietly made my way toward the lights, calling 911 as I moved. There were 3 people, and they were carrying jerry cans. As I got closer, I could smell gasoline. "Hey," I shouted. "This is private property." The figures turned and ran. I chased after them, but they had a head start and disappeared into the darkness toward the edge of my property that bordered Meadowbrook Hills. I could hear a car engine starting in the distance. The sheriff's deputies arrived within 10 minutes. Deputy Morrison was on duty again, and she took the situation seriously. "They were going to set fire to your vineyard," she said, examining the jerry cans they had dropped in their flight. "This is attempted arson. We are escalating this." The next day, detectives came out to investigate. They dusted the jerry cans for prints and found several good ones. They also found tire tracks where the vehicle had been parked. More importantly, they discovered a dropped cell phone in the bushes along the property line. The phone belonged to a man named Tyler Harrison. When detectives looked him up, they found he had been arrested twice before for vandalism and once for assault. He also had an employer, a property management company that was owned by Sunset Vista Properties. The detectives brought Tyler in for questioning. I was not present, but Marcus got the details later from the district attorney's office. Tyler initially denied everything, but when confronted with the physical evidence and told he was facing serious felony charges, he made a deal. He confessed that David Cunningham had hired him to scare me. The plan was to set a small fire in the vineyard that would destroy some vines and force me to spend money on repairs and fire mitigation. Tyler claimed he was not going to burn down the whole vineyard, just create enough damage to pressure me. He also admitted to being the one who cut my irrigation lines weeks earlier. David had paid him $2,000 for that job and promised $3,000 for the arson attempt. The detectives asked if Patricia Cunningham was involved. Tyler said he had never spoken to her, but he had overheard David on the phone several times talking to Patricia about the vineyard problem. With Tyler's confession, the district attorney opened a criminal investigation into David and Patricia Cunningham. Both were arrested on charges of conspiracy to commit arson, conspiracy to commit vandalism, and criminal threats. David faced additional charges of solicitation of arson. The arrests made the local news. Developer and HOA president arrested in vineyard arson plot, read the headline in the Sonoma Index-Tribune. The story detailed the months of harassment I had endured and the criminal conspiracy to drive me off my land. The reaction in Meadowbrook Hills was mixed. Some residents were shocked and immediately distanced themselves from the Cunninghams. Others, particularly those on the HOA board, circled the wagons and claimed it was all a misunderstanding. But the arrests changed the dynamic of everything. The civil trial was postponed while the criminal case moved forward. The Planning Commission immediately denied the rezoning petition, citing the criminal investigation. And the HOA board held an emergency meeting where they voted to remove Patricia as president and terminate all actions against my property. The new HOA president, a reasonable man named Frank Morrison, who had opposed Patricia's aggressive tactics from the start, came to see me personally. "Mr. Everhart, I want to apologize on behalf of the HOA," he said, standing awkwardly on my front porch. "Many of us did not know the full extent of what Patricia was doing. We trusted her judgment, and that was a mistake. The board has voted unanimously to formally recognize that your property is not part of Meadowbrook Hills and to cease all collection attempts permanently. We are also willing to discuss compensation for the damages you have suffered." I appreciated the gesture, but I was not ready to let the HOA off the hook entirely. "Frank, I appreciate you coming here, but the HOA as an entity participated in this harassment. Board members signed off on complaints, approved legal actions, and spent HOA funds pursuing me. There needs to be accountability. I understand. That is why we are not asking you to drop the lawsuit. We are just asking for a chance to make things right." Marcus and I discussed it and agreed to enter mediation with the HOA, separate from our actions against the Cunninghams personally. In mediation, the HOA agreed to pay me $75,000 for damages, lost business, and legal fees. They also agreed to file documents with the county permanently excluding my property from any HOA jurisdiction, and to send letters to every county agency that had received complaints, clearing my name. It was not everything I wanted, but it was a reasonable resolution that let me move forward. The criminal trial for David and Patricia Cunningham took place 8 months later. Tyler Harrison testified for the prosecution, describing in detail how David had hired him for both the irrigation sabotage and the attempted arson. The prosecution also presented the text messages and emails showing Patricia's coordination of the harassment campaign. The defense tried to argue that David's actions were those of a desperate businessman, not a criminal, and that Patricia had no knowledge of the arson plot. The jury did not buy it. David was convicted of conspiracy to commit arson, solicitation of arson, conspiracy to commit vandalism, and criminal threats. He was sentenced to 4 years in state prison. Patricia was convicted of conspiracy to commit vandalism and harassment. Because she was not directly involved in planning the arson, her charges were less serious. She received 2 years in county jail and 3 years of probation. Tyler Harrison, in exchange for his cooperation, received a reduced sentence of 18 months and was required to pay restitution for the irrigation damage. The convictions made headlines again. The story of an HOA president and developer trying to literally burn someone out of their property resonated with people who had their own HOA horror stories. I gave a few interviews to local media, and the story was even picked up by some national outlets. The publicity had an unexpected benefit for my business. People who heard about what I had been through wanted to support the Vineyard. My tasting room saw a huge increase in visitors, and I started receiving orders from restaurants and wine shops across California. My little vineyard was becoming more successful than I ever imagined. Bill Peterson called me after the trial to let me know that the HOA had also sent him a formal letter excluding his ranch from their boundaries. Apparently, my fight had protected not just my property but others in the area as well. "You did a good thing, Isaac," Bill said. "These HOAs think they can just run over people, especially small farmers like us. You stood up to them and you won. We all owe you one." As I sat on my porch that evening, watching the sunset over the vineyard, I reflected on everything that had happened over the past year and a half. I had come close to losing everything I had worked for, not because I had done anything wrong, but because some people thought they could use bureaucracy and intimidation to take what was not theirs. The vines were healthy. The grapes were almost ready for harvest, and my business was thriving. More importantly, I had set a precedent. HOAs could not just claim property that was never part of their development. They could not harass people into submission without consequences. And when they crossed the line into criminal activity, they would be held accountable. Marcus stopped by later that evening with a bottle of champagne to celebrate the final resolution of everything. We sat on the porch and toasted to justice, persistence, and the rule of law. "You know," Marcus said, "I have been practicing law for 20 years, and this is one of the most satisfying cases I have ever worked on. You could have given up a dozen times, but you kept fighting." "I did not have a choice. This vineyard is everything to me. You always have a choice. You chose to fight back, to stand up for your rights, and to see it through to the end. That takes courage." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars come out over the vineyard. In the distance, I could see the lights of Meadowbrook Hills, that planned community that had caused me so much trouble. But it did not bother me anymore. They were over there and I was here, and the boundaries between us were now clear and permanent. The next morning, I got up before dawn and walked through the vineyard as I did every day. The grapes were heavy on the vines, ready for harvest in another week. Brenda had assembled our team of workers, and we had orders lined up for this vintage before the grapes were even picked. Everything had worked out, but not because of luck. It worked out because I knew my rights, I documented everything, I hired good help, and I refused to be intimidated. The HOA had thought they could steamroll me because that is what they were used to doing. But they picked the wrong person to push around. As I walked back to the house, I stopped to look at the spot where that foreclosure sign had been staked into the ground so many months ago. The sign was long gone, but I remembered the moment I saw it, the shock and anger I felt. That moment had set everything in motion. If I had ignored it, if I had assumed it would go away on its own, I might have lost everything. But I took action immediately, and that made all the difference. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "State Bar is opening an investigation into Gordon Priest for his role in the foreclosure action. They are looking at whether he knowingly filed frivolous claims. Thought you would want to know." I smiled. Even the lawyer who enabled the HOA's actions was facing consequences. The system was not perfect, but when you fought for your rights and had the truth on your side, the system could work. Over the following weeks, life returned to a comfortable rhythm. We harvested the grapes in perfect conditions, and the juice quality was exceptional. This was going to be one of our best vintages ever. I hired 2 additional employees to handle the increased tasting room traffic, and Brenda and I started planning an expansion of our fermentation capacity. I also started speaking at agricultural association meetings about my experience, helping other farmers understand their rights when dealing with HOAs and developers. If my ordeal could help even one person avoid similar problems, it was worth sharing. Frank Morrison from the HOA board actually became a customer. He started coming to the tasting room regularly and became friends with some of my staff. One day, he pulled me aside. "I wanted you to know, we have completely restructured how the HOA operates," he said. "We have new bylaws that require board votes to be unanimous for any legal action. We have term limits for the president, and we have hired a new management company. What Patricia did is never going to happen again." "I appreciate that, Frank. I really do. We also wanted to invite you to speak at our annual meeting if you would be willing. Many of our residents do not really understand what happened. They just know the old president went to jail. I think hearing your side directly would be valuable." I was surprised by the request, but agreed. The following month, I attended the Meadowbrook Hills annual meeting in their community center. The room was packed with about 200 residents, and there was clear curiosity about the guy from the vineyard who had taken down their HOA president. I kept my remarks simple and focused on mutual respect and understanding. I explained that I had never wanted a fight with anyone. I just wanted to be left alone to run my business. I talked about the importance of knowing where HOA boundaries actually end and respecting property rights. And I emphasized that most conflicts could be resolved through communication rather than escalation. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Several residents came up afterward to apologize for not speaking up when Patricia was in charge. Others wanted to buy wine or schedule tours of the vineyard. A few even admitted they had signed petitions against me without really understanding what they were supporting. One woman, probably in her 70s, grabbed my hand and said, "Thank you for not giving up." My husband and I moved here thinking it would be a peaceful retirement community, but Patricia turned it into something ugly. You standing up to her was the best thing that could have happened to this neighborhood. As I drove home that night, I realized something important. This was never really about me versus Meadowbrook Hills. It was about one person and her husband who abused their positions of power and a system that allowed them to do it for far too long. The residents were not my enemies. They were victims too, in a different way. The civil lawsuit against David and Patricia Cunningham continued separately from the criminal case. Their insurance company tried to settle, but Marcus advised pushing for a trial on the civil claims because the criminal convictions made our case ironclad. The civil trial was almost anticlimactic after everything else. The jury heard about the harassment campaign, the vandalism, the attempted arson, and the conspiracy to steal my property. They deliberated for less than 3 hours before awarding me $230,000 in compensatory damages and an additional $500,000 in punitive damages. David and Patricia would be paying me for years, assuming they could pay at all. Sunset Vista Properties filed for bankruptcy shortly after David's criminal conviction, and Patricia had already lost her real estate license and her position with the HOA management company, where she worked. I did not take pleasure in their downfall, but I did take satisfaction in the justice of it. They had tried to destroy my life and my business for their own profit. Instead, they destroyed themselves. Marcus and I had one final meeting to close out all the legal matters. He handed me a check for the settlement proceeds, minus his fees and costs. "This is it," he said. "Everything is resolved. The criminal cases are over, the civil case is over, the HOA matter is settled. You are free and clear." "Thank you, Marcus. I could not have done this without you." "Yes, you could have. You would have fought this no matter what. I just helped you fight smarter." We shook hands and he left. I sat alone in my office holding the check and thinking about everything that had happened. The money would help, certainly. I could pay off some equipment loans, upgrade my facilities, and have a cushion for future problems. But the real victory was not financial. I had defended my rights. I had stood up to bullies. I had exposed corruption. And I had set a precedent that would help protect other property owners from similar abuse. That was worth more than any settlement check. The following spring brought new challenges and new opportunities. The vineyard continued to thrive, and we won several awards for our wines at regional competitions. I bought an adjacent 5-acre parcel that came up for sale, expanding the vineyard and creating a buffer between my property and Meadowbrook Hills. I also fell in love, which was completely unexpected. Brenda, my winemaker, and I had been working closely together for 3 years. During the crisis with the HOA, she had been my rock, keeping the business running when I was distracted by legal battles. Somewhere along the way, our professional relationship had deepened into something more. We started dating, and within a year, we were engaged. Brenda's last name was Lopez, so she would become Brenda Everhart after the wedding. We planned to get married in the vineyard, surrounded by the vines we had fought so hard to protect. Life had a way of working out sometimes. The challenges I faced with the HOA had been the worst experience of my life at the time, but surviving it had made me stronger, brought me closer to someone I loved, and given me a platform to help others. Looking back now, 3 years after that foreclosure sign first appeared on my property, I can see how every decision I made mattered. Hiring Marcus immediately, documenting everything, standing up at the planning commission meeting, not backing down when they escalated. Each choice built on the previous one, creating a path to victory. If someone had told me on that foggy morning when I first saw the foreclosure notice that I would end up married to my winemaker, with an expanded vineyard, a thriving business, and 2 people in jail for conspiring against me, I would never have believed it. But that is exactly what happened. The key lesson I learned through all of this is that you cannot let people with authority, whether real or imagined, intimidate you into giving up your rights. HOAs serve a legitimate purpose in many communities, but they are not above the law. When they overstep their bounds, they need to be challenged. I also learned the importance of community. Bill Peterson and the other farmers who stood with me at the Planning Commission hearing made a difference. The reasonable residents of Meadowbrook Hills who spoke up after the arrests made a difference. Even Deputy Morrison and the other law enforcement officers who took my complaints seriously made a difference. No one fights these battles alone. Today, when I give talks to agricultural groups or property rights organizations, I always emphasize a few key points. First, know your property boundaries and what you signed. If you did not sign an HOA agreement, you are not bound by it, no matter what they claim. Second, document everything. Every letter, every phone call, every incident. You will need that evidence. Third, get good legal help early. Waiting too long can let them establish a pattern that becomes harder to fight. Fourth, do not be afraid to go public. The media attention in my case helped expose the corruption and brought support I never expected. And finally, never give up. Patricia and David Cunningham were counting on me to fold, to decide it was not worth the fight. They assumed I would eventually sell out or walk away. But this was my life's work, my dream, my home. There was no amount of pressure that could make me surrender what was rightfully mine. As I write this, sitting on the porch of the farmhouse with Brenda beside me and 45 acres of healthy vines stretching out before me, I feel grateful. Not for the fight, but for the outcome. Not for the stress and fear, but for the strength I discovered in myself. Not for the enemies I made, but for the allies I found. The vineyard is safe. The business is growing. The bad guys are in jail. And I learned that sometimes, when you are faced with an impossible situation, the only way out is straight through. You stand your ground, you fight for what is right, and you trust that the truth will eventually win. That foreclosure sign tried to tell me I was going to lose everything. Instead, I won more than I ever imagined. Not just the legal battles, but confidence, purpose, and a story worth telling. The HOA tried auctioning my vineyard for unpaid dues. Too bad I never signed their agreement. And that one fact, that simple truth, was enough to bring down their whole corrupt scheme. Sometimes, the smallest details matter the most. My signature was not on their paperwork, and no amount of intimidation, harassment, or criminal conspiracy could change that fact. In the end, the law worked the way it was supposed to. Justice was served, and my vineyard remains exactly where it belongs, under my ownership, producing the best wines of my life.